What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode 8 of Understable Discourse. Today, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to get into the Masters Invitational review. We're going to talk about the match play matchups this weekend, the Kansas City Wide Open, and we're going to take a look at some sports betting lines. Let's get into it. Now, like I said, this past weekend was the Masters Invitational. I know the actual Masters happened, but the Masters Invitational was the Go Throw Tour's third stop. And it was lauded as their flagship event for the tour this year out at Eagles Crossing, largely considered to be one of the most expensive courses that we have on this planet, and according to the most of the pros who are out there, one of the nicest, if not the nicest, property for disc golf that we have out there. One of the big things that was really talked about was that there was a payout of $50,000 as a prize pool, with $20,000 going to the first place finisher this past weekend. But let's address the elephant in the room, okay? They hosted this event on the same weekend as the actual Masters, like I mentioned before. That's kind of a big deal because the Masters may very well be one of the most prestigious events in all of sports, and they played into it very heavily by busting out red jackets, as you can see on the picture here that I put on screen. They also had caddies wear the all-white caddy uniforms, and honestly, for me, I think this was a bit of a miss. Just with the way Masters is and the prestige around it, I think trying to sort of play it off as their attempt at having the Masters on the side of disc golf, I just don't think it went very well. I mean, you can kind of see that they were wearing the red jackets, but still, like, Luke had kind of a hoodie on underneath, and the red jacket didn't really fit Paul Oman as well as it could have. I think it's a fun attempt, but to try to realistically say that this is like the Masters of disc golf is a bit of a stretch for me, and I'm just not a fan of it. I think you need to let the players that are there and the course kind of speak for itself when it comes to how great this event is, and I think the pageantry for year one was unnecessary. If this would have been a really crazily successful year, lots of people there as spectators, I think next year they could make the case to do this again, and they could kind of make a spectacle of it a little bit, but for the first year, I think this was a swing and a miss, unfortunately. Let's also talk about one of the other things here, and that is the Go Throw Tour is supposed to be a point series event, or tour. So you get points for your finishes at every single event. You get points for doing awesome things like getting eagles and aces, and you get points for posting about the event on social media. But there's only one problem, is that when you have an invitational event, only people who are invited get to play. So what happens to all the people who are not invited, who now don't get an opportunity to win points that weekend? It seems kind of odd to me that you would have an invitational as part of the actual tour, give out points for the event, and it just kind of seems like a bit of an unfair thing for those who want to get into the finals. Now, I know that Luke has said before that pretty much everyone who plays in the Go Throw Tour this year will probably make their way into the finals, but that's still not the point. I think there's got to be some degree of consistency here. And listen, I understand. I promise you guys, I want them to succeed. I want the Go Throw Tour to do really well. I love the vibe they put off. The courses they're playing at are ones that we won't really get to see on tour because of their location and the ability for them to have live coverage. I think that this is a great idea. Because I want it to be successful so much, I am going to be critical of it, because if we just sit around being very buddy-buddy with everyone who's in and involved with the Go Throw Tour, and we don't actively bring up the critiques, we're never going to be able to see it grow and improve. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So we'll move on. Let's talk about the actual event itself. Like I said, 32 pros, some of the best pros in the country, took on this very particularly difficult layout at Eagles Crossing. Formerly, the course record here was 4 under par, and we were given a pretty awesome feature card of Gannon Burr, Calvin Heimberg, Emerson Keith, and Joona Heinonen. Now, not to be a complainer and not to once again bring up something that I could critique about this place, but I feel like they could have made a much more dynamite lead card. I know that there's the argument to be made that they wanted to split up the best players between Ace Run Pro and their Go Throw channel, but there were enough really incredible players there that they could have made 2 all-star feature cards for both of those channels. But being that this is the Go Throw event, the flagship event, I think they could have given us a much more incredible card. I mean, think about a card of Gannon Burr, Calvin Heimberg, Anthony Barella, and Adam Hammes. That would have been killer. And I think it would have drawn some major eyes and probably drawn a few more spectators to that card. Personally, I think it's a small nuance to bring up, but it might have been a little bit of a miss there. It just would have, for viewership on their channel, I think they could have knocked it out of the park, and they literally had the ability to walk up and put the ball on the tee, and they chose not to. So that's that there. But moving on into round one, the course was playing extra difficult. It's already a very, very difficult track. Like I said, the course record was only 4 under par. And but there was wind on the first day, which definitely didn't make it any easier. And the first 9 holes were kind of eating a lot of players alive. I mean, just some notable names. You've got Cole Radallen, who was 4 over par through 9 holes. Luke Taylor, 5 over par through 9 holes. Ezra Robinson, also 5 over par through 9 holes. And Isaac Robinson, 11 under par through 9 holes. So this course was really, really dogging on people and giving them a lot of challenge, because Eagles Crossing, if you've never seen it, is kind of the ultimate mix of distance and accuracy. You're playing through wooded stretches, really out in the open, big bomber stretches. It is a combination of probably every type of skill that you want to see players have to use. They talked a little bit about how they could use maybe 1 or 2 shorter holes that are a bit more about like touch than it is about distance and accuracy. But for the most part, every single skill set you could ever want a pro to have will be challenged at Eagles Crossing. And one of the biggest challenges for the field was hole 6, which was the menace of day 1, sitting at 717 feet. This par 4 was pretty much impossible for everybody. Only one singular person in the entire field birdied it, and that was Adam Hammes. It averaged 0.69 strokes over par, and while that number doesn't seem like it jumps off the page as being a very big deal based upon how a lot of Pro Tour events go, I have to stress the significance of that 0.69 strokes over par, because this isn't a field of 150 people that range from the top of the pile of Gannon Burr all the way down to the guys who are rated like 950 and 960 who are trying to compete on the Pro Tour with the pros, where they drag down the score averaging for holes. This is 32 of the best players. Now, not all 32 are the top 32 in the world, but I mean, conceivably, this is 32 people that are within, I think, the top 50 or 60. There's maybe a couple that fall outside that, but this is a really, really great sample size of talented players. So to have them go 0.69 strokes over par, it's a pretty significant thing when it comes to the whole difficulty. The back 9, however, is where most of all the movement went down in round 1. For several players, this was the saving grace for their rounds, because Gannon actually finished his round going 6 under on the last 7 holes, which would be enough for him to take down the first place spot after the first round. And then Calvin went 6 under on the last 5, and Vaino Makala kept it very, very clean. And that's how, the 3 of them kind of made their way onto lead card for round 2, where we left with Gannon breaking the course record by 1, shooting a 5 under par, and Calvin and Vaino tying the old course record at 4 under par, with AB only 1 stroke behind them. But with the course playing as difficult as it was, I really believe, and especially from the commentary between Luke and Germ, that anyone within 5 or 6 strokes definitely was capable of coming out in round 2 and taking the event. So it was still, by every meaning, anyone's ball game. Now, just as you can imagine the course played difficult in round 1, it played even more difficult, or at least seemed to play more difficult in round 2, because the wind was even greater than in round 1. And so the conditions were absolutely set for the bogeys and the double bogeys to start flying. And starting with a bogey really didn't mean too much, because hole 1 absolutely destroyed everyone. I mean, I watched several players go out of bounds on the feature lead card, and it just was a difficult hole altogether. And AB ended up starting with a bogey, but that really didn't deter him from being successful, because he followed that up with 3 straight birdies and an eagle. And that trend would continue for Anthony. Every single time he had a rough patch on the course, he would follow it up immediately with a string of birdies, and it put himself kind of in the driver's seat for the tournament. But pushing hard from the 4th card was Adam Hammes, who was 7 under by the end of hole 10, so already eclipsing through 10 holes the course record set by Gannon on the previous day. And even though he had a bit of a patchy back half of the course, he kept it up just enough for him to finish at 7 under par, making a brand new course record. Now, while this didn't put a lot of significant pressure on AB to have to birdie out, it did require him to limit the problems that he had, because while he, honestly, if he had a few more birdies, that 7 under wouldn't have been a big deal for him to overcome. If he did struggle in the back nine, that would have been a particularly difficult thing for him. And what happened was, all the eyes were on Adam Hammes throughout the second round. The camera was on him. We were watching his shots. But what we didn't realize is that creeping up along on the chase card was Gavin Rathbun, and he was putting himself in a position to force AB to have to birdie out. And so through 15 holes, Gavin was 8 under par. Really putting a lot of pressure. At that point, he had opened up a bit of a lead on AB from just 1 hole ahead of him. And so the pressure was on AB to perform, and that was kind of the last we heard of it. And then, once the lead card made it to hole 16, we found out that Rathbun actually triple bogeyed hole 16. And so this kind of opened it up wide for AB to just simply play it safe and par out to win the event. That wasn't how AB decided to do it. Instead, he decided to go 4 for 4 for birdies to finish the round and tie the course record with Adam at 7 under for the round. And with that win, he would take home a really solid $7,500. Now, wait a second. $7,500? I thought the winner was supposed to get $20,000. At least that's what I said earlier. That's what all of the marketing said for this event. So if you're asking those questions, just know that I found myself asking those same questions when I saw the payouts. I did some digging. I added up all the payouts for the entire field, and they came out to $19,997. Not the $50,000 prize pool they originally talked about. And at first I thought, oh, maybe I was just mistaken that the $50,000 was all in total for like the Ace Challenge and the triathlon thing they did, and that was the pool for everything. But I double checked, and no, that was supposed to be the prize pool for the actual main event itself, and $20,000 was supposed to go to first place. And I found the old flyers that showed all that. It's what I put up on the show last week. And I also noticed that in the lives that were leading up to the event a couple days prior, whenever they would say things like pros are out here competing for $50,000, they were now saying that they're out here competing for an impressive prize pool or a large prize pool. They stopped saying the actual dollar amount. And so here's the thing. If you're giving out 50 grand for your event, you say it. So I had to do, like I said, a little bit of digging, and I reached out to the production team over at Tour Life, Brody and new producer Mike and Yuli. They were able to reach out to someone from the event who confirmed that not that long before the event itself, funding had been cut for the event, and they had to go down to that limited prize pool of $20,000 with $7,500 going to first place. And don't get me wrong, $7,500 going to first is still a great payday for just a 32-person event, and the pros who were invited to play, they didn't have to pay to play. So that's a great thing. It was an all-around good event, but the thing is, nobody is talking about this particular problem. If you watched all the other major podcasts, now, because I brought it up with the Tour Life production crew, and I do make appearances on Tour Life, they talked about it. So I would definitely go check out the conversation they had with AB about the event, and kind of AB's comments on the situation. It's very, very interesting. Go check out that video that we recorded yesterday and is up over on the Foundation Podcast channel. But the fact that no other major podcast either A, caught this, or B, were talking about it, tells me that I think disc golf media as a whole is either, and I don't have a script for this, I'm kind of riffing a little bit here, so bear with me. I think that disc golf media sometimes, they don't do enough consumption of content for the job that they have. And there were several times on some of the bigger podcasts, because let's be honest, disc golf media is not a very, very big thing, but some of the more well-known podcasts, we had people saying like, I haven't watched it yet, or I've only watched part of it. And at what point is it our job? And I say our job, I consider myself loosely in disc golf media. I know I've got a very small channel here, but I make appearances on some bigger channels, and I consume just about everything. And before you say, well, they got a lot going on, I have a full-time job. I'm a parent, I'm a husband, and I still consume everything I can so that I can be as up-to-date and informed for you guys, for the dedicated few who are watching my show. So I just feel like there has to be some better degree of almost journalism on their part, or the worst case, which is they know about it and they refuse to talk about it because they're friends with the guys in the Go Through Tour. I think we should be able to talk about this stuff. Like I said earlier, I want the Go Through Tour to be successful. We should be able to be a little critical of what it is they're doing, and I'd love to know why. I think there should be, it should be out in the open. I heard a story where the tickets for Sunday originally cost like $55 or something like that, and they decreased the price to $25 on site, but anyone who bought ahead bought the ticket for $55, and I don't know that refunds went out. That's unconfirmed, so if refunds actually went out, then, that's great to hear, but the fact that, like, tickets were sold at one price and then they were dropped, maybe because the funding was cut and they wanted people to be there. I know they had an issue where they hosted this event at the same time as a major A tier in the St. Louis area, so a lot of people weren't able to go out and view this. There's just a lot of parts that just need, I think, to be better across the board. So we're going to keep following the Go Through Tour. I'm going to keep being critical because I want them to succeed. I really, truly do. But yeah, like I said, I'm hoping these issues are fixed. Overall, the communication has to be a little bit better. Their next full event is at Kayak Point. It's the Kayak Point Showdown in Seattle, Washington. This is going to be the longest stretch that we get between their main events, so hopefully it gives them some time to debrief and talk about the things that they're doing and maybe find some ways to better improve the communication. But I'm excited for their events. Regardless of how those background things go, the actual coverage itself is incredible. The graphics package they use is beautiful. What they're doing in showcasing these courses vastly outweighs a lot of the problems that they're experiencing. So definitely go check out their rounds. It's worth it 100%. Now let's talk about this upcoming weekend. Looking at the event overall, the 43rd annual Kansas City Wide Open, one of the longest running events probably in the country, has been around for quite some time. In 2023, it joined the Pro Tour as an official Silver Series event that was won by Gannon Burr and Ali Smith, and it returned in 2024 as a featured Q Series event won by Drew Gibson and Lisa Fakis. And this actually used to be one of the biggest events of the year when it was part of the National Tour Series, hosting a former world championship, I believe in 2018. For this event. Now, it's been at some different courses, so it's not always been at the same course, but the event itself has a lot of history and a lot of prestige behind it. But this is the first time in a number of years that we've seen a nearly full field take on this event. Now, we're missing some notable players, specifically the European players. We're missing Niklas Antila, who decided after 2 wins in a row he would go and get some rest and, get himself prepared for the first major of the year. I think that's a pretty baller move on his part. So he's doing that. But that means we're also missing out on Kristen Latt, Silva Saarinen, Evelina Salonen, and Henna is also out there as well. So other than, kind of a grouping of the Euro players, the field is still, I think, the strongest this event has probably ever seen, or at least for a good long time. So I'm really excited. It's one of the events that I enjoy watching every year. I love the course they're currently playing now. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But one thing to take into consideration, and something that we've all been taking into consideration this entire year, is the weather. So this weekend, we're looking at some kind of wild weather again for the event. For tomorrow, for Thursday, they're expecting somewhere in the low 80s with some higher winds. Now, that doesn't matter for the actual event itself, but it will make a difference probably in the match play because it's going to be a bit warmer. The wind is going to be up, so slightly better conditions for the match play event. Going into Friday, the weather takes a bit of a downward turn with the temperature dropping into the 60s and the wind sticks around, and I think the wind is actually supposed to pick up a bit on Friday, so that should really play into how the round is played, especially if it's a headwind or tailwind on some of those big open holes. That will really affect the success of what we see on the course. But as we move further into the weekend, the wind actually starts to die down, but the temperatures drop into the 50s and the rain starts coming, with Sunday looking pretty wet and pretty rainy. I think it said heavy rainfall at times to be expected during the day. So the weather is going to once again be an extra challenge for the players, both physically and mentally. And we'll see how they handle that, because that had the same kind of experience at Music City, and that can really wear you down as a player. And there are some players that we know of on tour who are very, very solid, but when the weather kicks around, it definitely affects their game in a negative way. Now, looking at the actual course itself, we're going to be playing this weekend at Bad Rock Creek. It's a very, very tough course. And over the last 2 years, I think it's been one of my favorite courses to watch because of just what it does to the players. There are several, I think, standout features of the course. First of all, it's elevation, elevation, elevation. There is not, at least to my knowledge, I just recently watched a few practice rounds to be sure, there isn't a single hole in this entire course that's just flat. Every single hole has some degree of elevation change. You're either going uphill, you're going downhill, or navigating some kind of bump or slump. Yes, I wrote that down. Some kind of bump or slump in the middle of the fairway. There's just never a time when you're playing and finishing on the same level where you tee off at. It's always some degree of climb or decline or whatever. The other thing that I like about this is the par 4s, which there are plenty of, are very demanding because we get a lot of par 4s on tour that I think find themselves in one of two categories. And either they're like long holes where you have to kind of throw two semi-straight hyzer-ish shots to get to the green, or they're power shots off the tee with short technical approaches to the green. This course kind of flips that on its head a bit, and they give you these shorter, more technical style tee shots where you're then forced to, depending on what position you found yourself in, throw with power from your second lie, from your first lie there, if you want any chance to get the birdie. So I love kind of what it does in terms of twisting what we expect par 4s to be and making pros really have to get touchy on that first shot to set themselves up for the big toss for the second shot, which puts a premium on anyone who has good circle 2 putting, especially with the wind and the distance required on this course, both for FPO and for MPO. Now, when it comes to looking at the actual course itself, the difficulty level, there are certain holes that are very notable, and we'll go over them here in a minute, but we kind of find ourselves in a position where the fields of the last 2 years haven't been anywhere near as strong as they could be, and course revisions have been made. So trying to rely on any kind of core stats is very, very difficult. I'm glad we're here this year because it'll give us some degree of history to go off of. But one of the most noticeable things about the course is the vast difference in distance between the MPO and the FPO layouts. Both are par 67s, but there is a 2,036 foot difference between the FPO and the MPO layouts. And one of the main differentiators here is that the MPO tee pads are usually further back, placed at a different angle, or they've taken the old FPO layout that was maybe a par 4 or whatever, and they've shortened to a shorter basket location and turned it into a par 3, or they've lengthened the layout to the MPO basket, but they've ticked something up a par to kind of, make it a bit more fair for what the FPO is having to play. There are actually only 4 holes where both divisions share the same tee pad and the same basket, where one of them is a bit of a different par for the MPO or the FPO field. So like I said, since we don't really have a Pro Tour Elite stop last year, it was just a Q Series, we don't really have a full course comparison to make, but there are some holes that I think are difference makers here and that I want to take note of. I personally think that hole 1 may be one of the most aesthetically pleasing starting holes that we get on tour. It's reminiscent of a couple other holes that kind of do the same type of thing. I think of hole 1 at Maple Hill, where you've got the beautiful pond in the middle and you have to play a really complicated par 4. Well, this doesn't have the same length and just the same natural beauty as a Maple Hill. Hole 1 here is definitely a difficult hole because it offers players the ability to make a safe shot, to get to a landing zone, and then you have to play onto this kind of small green area. But if you're certain MPO players and the wind is right, there is a high risk, high reward shot of trying to push the green, because if you can even blow past the green, you kind of put yourself in a position where it becomes a very, very easy birdie, and you may even get yourself an eagle look. However, what I like about it is, if you try to do something a little bit crazy, the drop zone is not an easy shot. They set you back at the other side of the water. You still have to throw over it with some distance. It's it's a really well-designed hole. It's a great one to start off a tough course. I think hole 1 is going to be a lot of fun to watch both the FPO and the MPO play. Hole 3 is another fun one to watch. This is, I think, a perfect example of a more technical style tee shot with a longer and more demanding second shot, because you can try as hard as you'd like to be aggressive off the tee, but you're not going to be rewarded by much more than 15 feet, 10 feet, whatever it may be. The angle makes a big deal where you find yourself landing, but no matter what, you're looking at nearly a 400-foot plus uphill second shot into your green. And for the FPO, it's still really tough because it's like 280, 300 feet uphill, depending on where their landing zone is. So this is a very demanding hole that requires a touchy tee shot and an extremely powerful second shot, just uphill the whole way. I definitely could see myself feeling like a very, very small person throwing this hole. Hole 5 is another very uniquely challenging hole because of the way elevation changes in the middle of the fairway. And I know you may be noticing something here, that there's a lot of holes that I'm calling significant in the front 9. I think the front 9 is where there's going to be a lot of test for the players and a lot of difficulty, and you could find yourself getting through the front 9 with a whole lot of pars and being out of position to score aggressively on the course, because these holes just are challenging and demanding. But hole 5, one of the best parts about it is that because there is one of those bumps I talked about in the middle of the fairway, if you throw your tee shot a bit too short, you put yourself in a position where you have to throw kind of over that bump, blind into a landing zone that does have water either near it, around it, and for FPO, water you have to go over. So it forces you to almost take a really risky shot or have to lay up. So that tee shot matters a lot, because if you can push to the very top of that bump, you now have a flat shot where you can see everything and make a nice educated decision as to how you're going to throw and what kind of landing zone you want to put yourself in. So it's a really great hole because every shot is so important, but that tee shot, knowing the difference between being at the bottom of the bump, the middle of the bump, or at the very top of it, can make a big difference in the scoring outcome for the hole for the entire field. Jumping to the back 9, we get to hole 15. I think when I look at holes on this course, holes in other course, this is easily, I think, one of my favorites out there. I'm going to be making probably a Dream 18 or some kind of my favorite holes on tour list. I think hole 15 is probably going to find its way on there, and that's because sometimes there's like negative stigma to sub 300 foot par 3s on the Pro Tour. They're too easy, they're too short. But this hole takes something that's very simple and makes it anything but simple. And that's proven by, you look at two guys who do a lot of course practice rounds, like Ezra Aderhold and Aaron Gossage. They talk a lot about the importance of, pushing the boundaries, pushing the limits. They like distance holes. They like to be challenged, but they stepped up to this one, and their first thought wasn't, oh, this hole's way too short. They looked at it, they're like, that's terrifying. Because the way it's set up, there is a very safe gap that's off to the right that will, if you hit it, give you a very, very solid par look if you can make it through. So yeah, you can kind of take the easy route and you can get your par, but there is an obvious gap to the left that allows you to attack the green as long as you're comfortable trying to carry the water in front of it. And what happens is, in an effort to be confident in yourself, you might juice that shot and then put yourself in a position that may be the same as or worse than if you would have just taken the route on the right. So it's a hole that requires you to make a decision and live with it. And I like that a lot because it's at hole 15, and so it's down the stretch, and it comes right before a par 5, a par 4, and a par 5 to finish. So this is your last chance to have that shorter par 3 that, depending on what shot you like, maybe this is the last chance to get that easier birdie, and in the effort to do so, you may find yourself taking a bogey. I think it's a perfectly placed hole on the course. It's going to be super challenging, and I'm excited to see what players choose to take which route, whether it's left, right, whatever it may be. Next up, and last but definitely not least by any means, is hole 18. I think this is one of the best hole 18s we have on tour. It is phenomenal. It is extremely high risk, high reward for a finishing hole where you can choose to kind of play straight for the birdie. You can try to stretch yourself out for the eagle. There are areas that you can get absolutely locked down in if you're not careful. And one of the things that makes this really hard is that there is an ideal landing space about 450 feet uphill requiring incredible power to make it to. Now you can play shorter than that, and there's a little kind of woodsy gap off to the right that you can play to a safe landing zone, but that gap is dangerous. Lots of players have tried to play there in the past, and they've had their shots knocked down, and before they know it, they're just trying to save their bogey on the hole. So the ideal play is if you can get to that 450-foot landing zone, then you can make a full choice whether you want to go to a bailout area that's right in front of you, or if you want to make the hyper-aggressive shot and push the tiny peninsula green. It creates so many decisions for the players off the tee, in the middle of the fairway, as they approach the green, that it's a perfect way to end a round, because I personally think that there could be 2 and 3 stroke swings on this hole. We saw that a couple years ago where players just they completely locked themselves out of whatever position they had going into hole 18 because of poor play. And some players literally gained 3, 4, 5 positions in the leaderboard because they were able to be aggressive, and it paid off for them. So hole 18 is a great finisher. Can't wait to see the pros play it. Now that we've looked at the course itself, let's talk about the match play event that's going to happen before the event that actually happens on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This weekend, we're going to get to see the very first half of the rescheduled match play events. Now, obviously, because a lot of the European players went back to Europe, we can't show their matches. So this is the first half of the match play round. The other half, I don't know when they're going to be putting it out yet. I don't think I've seen an announcement for it, but once we know, we'll definitely be talking about it here on Understable Discourse. But for this weekend, we have 8 different unique matchups. The first one we have is Ella Hansen versus Holland Handley. And then we have Deanne Carey and Allie Smith. Now, for the Ella Hansen and Holland Handley fight, I say fight because these two are, incredible competitors. Ella has a win at Supreme Flight this year. Holland has the win at the Open at Austin. And I think that both of them are going to be in an absolute dogfight to see who takes this. But for this matchup, I'm going to lean in Holland's direction just due to her overall consistency. She's not missed the podium one time this year. So I feel like she has this matchup in the bag for her. But on the Deanne Carey and Allie Smith side, this is a really interesting one because if you look at the 2024 stats that are on screen here, it definitely appears that Deanne gets the nod. However, Allie Smith has experience winning at this event in 2023. She's won at this course. Deanne has a slightly better season when it comes to her top finishes, but Allie has kind of kept all of her finishes inside the top 25. And if you look at the stats, Allie is winning this matchup this year in terms of fairways hit, being the 5th best on tour, her C1 and C2 in regulation. However, Deanne is leading the field at putting and C1X at 92% compared to Allie at 55%, and I just can't ignore that stat being so significant, so I'm going to have to lean in the direction of Deanne Carey on this one. Next up, you can see these two matchups here of Owen Scoggins versus Kat Murch and Eliezra Midling versus Katrina Allen. These are some fun ones. I think that the Owen Scoggins-Kat Murch matchup is going to be the closest to a too close to tell type scenario. For me, I think that Kat hasn't been playing at the level that most of us would have expected her to have been playing by this point in the year, but she still hasn't missed a top 10 yet. Owen also has been relatively competitive so far this year. I think this is going to be, honestly, looking at all the matchups across both the MPO and FPO, this might be the best matchup for banter between what we know Kat Murch is capable of and we know some of the absolute one-liners that Owen Scoggins can drop. I would love to be on this card, looking to follow them live. I really hope that they make sure they show this one. I think it's going to be absolutely entertaining. But I'm going to lean in Kat's direction for this particular match play matchup. For Eliezra Midling and Katrina Allen, this is a classic example of youth versus experience. Eliezra has definitely had a great start this year, but since then she's slowly been kind of falling off those finishes. She got 6th place at the Supreme Flight Open, but she hasn't been really better than 20th place since, with a 40th place coming just recently at the Music City Open. Now, Kat, on the other hand, has had her first appearance back after having her baby, and it went a little rocky at first, but she's been nothing but top 10 since then. So I think experience is going to win out the day for this matchup. I'm going to give this one to Katrina Allen. Hopping over to the MPO side of the match play events, we have Gannon Burr versus Anthony Barella and Chris Dickerson versus Luke Humphreys. What? Gannon Burr versus Anthony Barella. From a statistic perspective, these guys are really close in a lot of the stat categories. The only exception is that on C2 putts, AB has a 7% lead over Gannon. But what a matchup. We just saw the two of these guys throwing down over at Eagles Crossing. I think that AB's season has definitely been a little up and down, but he is coming off a big win this past weekend. But Gannon is still Gannon. I mean, he's been narrowing closer and closer to a win this year. I think this one is kind of a complete toss-up in my mind, but given the distance requirements and the necessity to probably hit C2 putts, I'm actually going to give the nod to AB for the match play between the two of them. But I think this one could just, you could flip a coin 10 times, and these guys could play each other 10 times, and it's going to be either 6-4 or 5-5. It could be either one of them. For the Chris Dickerson and Luke Humphreys matchup, though, I don't want to dismiss the potential here for fun, but the Luke we're seeing as a player in 2025 is definitely not the Luke that we saw in 2024. I don't know if it's just because he's a really, really busy guy now. He's got all the stuff going on with GoThrow. He's not playing in those GoThrow events. So I just think he's playing less disc golf this year. He's a busier guy than ever before, and we're just not seeing the level of play that we're used to. Is he capable of popping off in a one-round match play against Chris Dickerson? Sure. But I think that Chris Dickerson is outclassing him here. This one has to go to Dickerson in my mind. And the last group of matchups we have is Ricky Wysocki versus Paul McBeth and Matt Oram versus Ezra Aderhold. The historic matchup, Ricky Wysocki, Paul McBeth. We've all wanted this for a long, long time. And I know a lot of people are saying, but they're friends now. They can't be competitive. These two have an inner competitor inside of them that cannot be turned off. I think it's not a stretch to say that Ricky would much rather have Paul's season so far this year. And Paul's been close numerous times to getting a victory, but I'm going to dismiss that for Ricky because in an isolated situation like this one against Paul, I think the inner fire for competition, I think it turns on for this match. I think they really, really duked this one out. I'm still picking Paul here, and that's just predominantly due to the level of play that he's been demonstrating. But I think this, I would almost rather that the two of them don't play anyone else in their division and we just get 3 or 4 matchups of Paul versus Ricky. But I think I'm going to give this one to Paul right now because Ricky just isn't quite there yet in my mind. Jumping over to the Matty O versus Ezra matchup. Matty O definitely has the experience on this course. He's played well back in 2023. However, I think this season has been anything but what we're used to when it comes to Matty O. When I think of him, I always kind of think about the guy who last year got 8 top 10 finishes and kind of always found himself in the mix at every single event. And that's just not what we're getting this year. He's got 1 top 10, 1 top 20, a 34th, and a 59th place. He's also only putting 22% from C2. On the other side of that coin, Ezra Aderhold is second on tour, putting 42% from C2, almost double what Matty O is able to do. So Ezra also has the distance that he needs to push some of these holes. I mean, even though Ezra's, first time playing this course in a competitive scenario, I'm just going to have to give this one to Ezra Aderhold. Now that we've got the match play figured out, let's talk about the actual event itself, who I think is going to win there. When I look at this event, I'm taking a few things into consideration. First, the proficiency in poor conditions. I want people who are able to play in poor conditions. I'm looking for C2 putting proficiency and performance because that is going to matter a lot here. I think we're going to have a lot of guys putting and gals putting from 40 feet, 35 feet. So you're going to need to have that C2 percentage looking pretty clean. I think distance is definitely something you want to see out of people, and then good decision making on this course, being able to make the right choice when it comes up, knowing when it's not time to press and it's time to maybe play a little bit safer. I think that's going to matter a lot. In the FPO division, in third place, my third place finisher is a consistently great putter from C1X and C2. Her experience makes her a really good decision maker on the course. And while her distance isn't a very big strong suit of hers, I think that Owen Scoggins is going to end up in third place. She has all the skills she needs, minus the distance a little bit, but the veteran status she has, I think, is going to propel her to third place. Coming in second for me, with the absence of some of the Euro talent, I think the airways are clear for her second podium finish of the season, having all the power you could ever need to be successful on this course. I'm going with Ella Hansen in second place. I think she's going to be highly competitive with my first place finisher, which, by the way, we might as well just call it. It's a safe pick. Yes, Kristen's not in the field, and she has every skill set necessary. Her only real competitor, I think, this weekend is probably going to be herself. That's Holland Handley. I think Holland Handley takes the win for the FPO field, but I could see Ella putting some pressure on her down the stretch. Over on the MPO side, I can't pick Nicolas because he's back home, hanging out and having a good time and getting some rest, which is good news for everybody else on tour because he is the hottest guy on tour right now, but he's not here this weekend, so we're not going to be picking him. Coming in third place, I think this particular person's solid season continues. I think they're inching closer and closer to the elusive win they've been hunting now for quite a while, and if he can just fix some putts down the stretch, you can definitely make it there. So for third place, I have Paul Macbeth getting really close once again, but not being able to take down the win. I think what we've seen so far, I think he's got it in him, but every kind of time he's been there, he just struggled a little bit in that final round. So let's see if he has enough to bring this one home for himself, but I have him coming in third. In second place, I think having one of the best starts we've ever seen from him on tour and coming off an absolute burning hot second round at Eagles Crossing. Second place for me is going to belong to Adam Hammes. I'm excited to see him tear up the course. I'm enjoying watching him play this year, and I'll be the first to admit Adam has never been one of my favorite players. He's not a player that I don't like. He's always kind of been a meh player to me, but this year I've just really enjoyed watching him play. The consistency, the emotion that he puts behind it, I enjoy it. Love watching it. Can't wait to see him do even more and have more success. Coming in first place, he finished third at the Open at Austin. He finished second at Music City. I think his first win is finally upon us. The man who forced the tournament directors to change the rules on hole 12 in the middle of this event 2 years ago, Gannon Burr, I think takes down his first tour win of the year. So I think that's what's going to happen. But what do you think? Who do you have winning the FPO and the MPO divisions? Do you think I'm absolutely crazy for not having Anthony Barella in my top three, despite we know rain can sometimes be for him? You think I'm absolutely insane for having Owen Scoggins on the list because she can't throw very far? Let me know in the comments. Tell me how nuts I am. Who do you have winning FPO and MPO? Show me the way and let everyone know that you know what's best. So go ahead and leave that in the comment section down below. Now, coming into our last segment-ish here of the show, I want to talk about the betting lines. You know, the DFS, daily fantasy sports stuff, and the actual lines that we see over on the Underdog site. But before I get into that, I do have something I want to make sure I clarify here, and that's that we're going to be talking about gambling, and this is something that you should do very responsibly. These are not sure win games, and gambling is also inherently a risk that you're taking. On this show here, you know, I'm going to be talking about the lines and kind of what I think is going to happen, but these are not guarantees. I'm not actually betting any money. Understable Discourse is not betting any money on this kind of stuff. I don't live in a state where I can. So this is just merely me looking at the lines that are presented, looking at what the options are, and telling you what I think the outcome is going to be. So please take that with a grain of salt. Be responsible if you decide to get into the betting at all. And obviously, you know, it's only do it if you're in a state that allows it. Don't do anything illegal. You don't want that on you. So let's take a look at what Underdog has. So the way that they handle these lines, very, very simple. All right, you're trying to pick whether or not a competitor is going to finish better or worse than the number that they present you for that competitor. They always end in 0.5 because they want you to be able to choose the positions on either side. Obviously, if they said someone's going to finish better or worse than fourth, then you can't pick fourth. You're saying either fifth or worse or third or better. So they always say things like 3.5 or 4.5. And I'll throw these up here on the screen in a moment so we can talk about them. But it's important to know that the numbers and just these things change. So even though I'm telling you what these lines are now, between now and when the event starts itself, they may change because of the number of bets coming in and like the lines that are being pushed and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm going to present to you what I'm seeing on the numbers that are existing right now. And please note they could change before the actual event starts. So looking at the first grouping here, you know, you got Missy Gannon. I think we already talked about who I think is going to be my top three. So I have Missy finishing outside of 3.5. For Chris Dickerson at 12.5, I think that's a really, really tough one to call. He hasn't cracked the top 10 once per year, so I'm actually going to go on the over and say that Chris finishes outside of 12.5 and in 13th or worse for this event. Gannon's an easy one. I have him winning the event, so under 3.5, 100%. And then looking at AB, this is the first one that I think is really, really hard for me to choose. My gut tells me that he doesn't really excel in poor weather conditions, so I'm actually going to have him finishing worse than 5.5. With the second grouping here, I guess you can call me a pessimist, but I've got Ricky finishing outside of 5.5. Just haven't seen it yet this year to feel comfortable putting him inside, 5th place or better. For Holland, I think she's going to win the event, so definitely better than 2.5. Ezra Robinson, I think, has the arm, the putting skills, and I think he's due for a solid finish, so I'm going to say better than 7.5 for Ezra Robinson. And for Paul McBeth, he's going to be fighting for podium, so definitely better than 6.5 on my end. The next four here, Calvin, I think this is going to be a bounce back event for him. He's inside 7.5 for me. Rebecca Cox, without the European field there, her consistency is going to be a clutch thing on the course. I have her finishing inside of 9.5. Kat Mertsch, her average finish this season is 8th. It's actually like 7.75. So until I see better consistency, I just can't take her inside of 6.5. I have her finishing outside of that. And then Owen Scoggins, I got her taking 3rd place, so I'm going to say she beats the 4.5 projection. For the last grouping here, for Isaac Robinson, I don't have confidence yet so far, so I'm going to say worse than 9.5. That's probably going to be my most controversial pick on this list, but that's how I feel right now. Haley King, she had a great first showing last weekend despite poor conditions. I believe she's definitely got a top 7 in her tank, so I have her beating that mark, especially with the European players not in the field. Ella Hansen, I have her on the podium this week, so finishing better than 5.5 makes sense for me. And Natalie Ryan, we don't really have a body of work yet this season to see, so outside of 9.5 is where I'm going there. I'm going to be keeping track of how I did against these specific lines throughout the year, so we can either relish in my prediction skills next week, or I can absolutely roast myself for being crazy. If the lines change between now and when the event starts, obviously I'm not going to judge myself on what the lines change to. I'm going to judge myself against what I just said here, but it'll be fun to kind of track throughout the year and see how we do on our end. And like I said, I want to cover the daily fantasy sports stuff. I'm not going to go into super big detail about the picks that I chose per se, but I want to tell you about the really, really cool thing that is Hold My Bag. So for those who've never tried it before, it's a team pick'em style type of, fantasy sports picking thing. That was so great. Oh my word. Bear with me, folks. It's been a long week. But what you do is you select one player from each tier to make up your team, and each of those tiers represents different rankings in the Pro Tour. So like tier 1, we're looking at the very, very top players on tour. And then for tier 5, you're going to have to dive down to the players that you don't see their names very often, and you're going to have to say who you think is going to do the best amongst that tier. And you get points for their hole scoring, their finishing position, and there are even bonus points that can be won for things like bogey-free rounds. It's really, really cool. It's a lot of fun. It's super easy to play. And the best part is, if you don't want to put money into it, they've got a completely free version where you can win some killer gift cards. I think I saw they've got gift cards for this week that are over $100 for OTB for first place, and they've got a second and third place prize. But it's completely free to play. And then if you're in the right state for it, I know they're going to be doing stuff where there's a paid division to play in, but you can play it for 100% free, which is great. I'm going to put them up on my screen real quick. Here are my picks for the week. Looking at the different tiers, I'm really excited about these picks. I think they're going to do super well. Some fun names there. Gavin Rathbun just had a great event this past weekend. So I'd love to know who your picks are. The best part is you can go over to Hold My Bag DG. That's Hold My Bag DG, no spaces in there.com to play along. I'm going to put the link in the description down there. Go over there, sign up. It's free. Compete in this event. And the best part is a lot of touring pros play this. You can compete against them, and you're competing against me. So let's see if you can win. I'd love to see what your picks are. Tell me about them in the comments. That'd be a lot of fun. And maybe if enough people play and they're really into it, I can form a league over there, and we can have a little Understable Discourse league where all of you as followers and listeners can play along, and we can have a little bit of fun, and I'll shout out who wins our league over here. It'll be a good time. So make sure you go and check that out and play that game. But that's it for us today. I really appreciate the time for you to sit here and listen to me ramble on for who knows how long at this point. Please go make sure to check out the Kansas City Wide Open this weekend, and stay tuned every single day for content on our Instagram and our other socials. Make sure to subscribe, like the video if you can. It's the best way you can probably support us. And let me know in the comments what you think about our picks, what I do right, what I call wrong, how am I crazy, what do you want to see on the show from week to week. But that's it. Until next time, have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next Wednesday.